One of the questions I got was about character rigging and walk cycles. And there's many ways of doing it. There's a free plugin called Duik Bassel. That's D-U-I-K-B-A-S-S-E-L. And this is an example of it. I animated a walk cycle, and I actually didn't even have to animate it. I just changed the general motion from 0 to a start point, and I'm going to drop down my resolution a little bit just so that you can go a little faster here. But if you're using the Duik plugin, one of the benefits is you can rig your character, and you can get things like automated walk cycles, and you can have them start and stop. So I went from 0 to 100 again, just so it's a full walk, and then slowing down into the resting pose. Aside from this automated walk cycle that you can start or stop as you see fit with keyframes, which is highly useful, once you've got a character rigged using software like this, you can then pick things like, say, the head, and then you can change the position and the rotation, and that'll affect the rig as well because everything is connected. This is the forearm. You can keyframe the position with the controller, and you can also rotate the hands with it. So that's one option, is using Duik and setting up a rig. Rigs can get far more complicated, and so that's just a quick preview of Duik. If you're going to rig your character, and I already saw that the person had started drawing in Illustrator. If you're going to be doing simple shapes like this, even with the path tool, my recommendation is do that in After Effects so you don't have to re-import everything, but it's what you're comfortable with. Now, both of these students are using the HDTV preset, which I love, and that's what I want to see. What I did here is I went View, I hid the transparency grid. So if you want to see it again, that's everything that's transparent, but you're just going to hurt your eyes looking at that the whole time. So, it's just under View, and then you could put Hide Transparency Grid right there. That's how I went from the alpha preview to this nice calm white background, just so you can see your shapes better when you're working. So that's a quick tip there, and I'm going to tackle those logos in a moment. Okay, so if you're rigging a character in anything, After Effects, Illustrator, well, creating it, I'm going to give this, I'm just going to do simple, solid fills, bright colors so everyone can see what's happening. I will pretend this is the head, and I'll label everything. I misspelled it. I don't care. I'm the teacher. I can do what I want. Now, I clicked off, and the reason I clicked off is because, like I said, you want layers. You want everything to be its own layer so you've got complete control. And I'm going to make everything its own color just so that you can see each body part. I'll call this torso. And once I've got all my body parts, I'm going to go into parenting as well as anchor points as well. Make these the hips. So like I said, whatever you create your artwork with, this is what you're going to have to do. Have as many pieces as you need. So there's the hips and then the legs. But, I'm just flying through this to demonstrate it. There's my front leg. And I'm not going to put feet just because I don't want to bore everyone to death. And I'm going to call this front leg because we're assuming this is a side to 3/4 pose. We'll say this is a 3/4 view. And then just to make it, let's hit S for scale, make that a little longer. And I'm going to duplicate this and call it back leg. Alright, and I'm going to change the color of that. Green, okay. And then the arms, I'm just going to duplicate my arms from the legs. One sec. Remember Command D or Control D to duplicate. And if you've got them selected and you move them together, you keep them together. I'm going to keep my arms and legs color-coded the same. One, to save time, and two, like the front and the back are different colors. Okay, that's roughly our person. I'm going to put the head at the top. Torso. What's in the back will be below the torso. What's in the front will be above the torso. Okay, so first off, the head, I'm going to want the anchor point near where the neck is. So use your pan behind tool and you hold down Command or Control to snap it, because that's where the motion is going to be driven from. The torso, I'm going to put the anchor point at the bottom to get a little bit of squashing and stretching going on. The arm, both arms are going to be at the top where it meets the shoulder. And the legs will be where it meets the hip, like up at the top. Okay, so roughly I've got my anchor points where I want them now. It's going to be where the motion's driven from, which we learned at the very beginning. I'm going to parent the head to the torso so they stay together. The arms will be parented to the torso, and the hips will be parented to the torso, and the legs will be parented to the hips. Okay, so my legs are parented to the hips, the arms are parented to the torso, the hips are parented to the torso, and the head is parented to the torso. So what that means is if I move my torso, the whole character moves, okay? That's the first thing we've done. We've kept the whole character together. But these can be animated independently. My anchor point moved on the arm, let's put that there. So what that means is if I go R for rotate, the arm moves. And if I rotate the torso, the head and the arms should move with it, and everything's moving with it. Okay? The fastest way to explain a walk cycle, let me hit U to hide all my keyframes, is this. We'll pretend the person's walking this way from right to left. Okay. I'm going to focus on my arms and my legs for the beginning of this. And I'm going to change my workspace. This is a workspace I came up with a while ago. It's to help you with character rigging because, I've got more room vertically. As you can see, I already was running out. So now I can pay attention to what's going on here. Let me undo that. Here's your basics for a walk cycle. And I'm going to slide this over here so we can see more of our timeline. Front arm. Let's rotate that in this direction. So if this is going in this direction at 36 degrees, the back arm will do in the negative at the same amount. Like such. Now the front arm is going forward, so I'm just going to do, if the front arm's going forward, the front leg is going back. So I'll just do about there, 28, and then this will go 28 in the opposite way. Okay, front arm forward, rear leg forward, back arm back, front leg back. See, red's the front, green's the back. This is a fast way of looking at it visually. Any questions so far on what you're seeing? I'm going to add an eye to the front head so we can see what direction we're facing. Remember, if you've got a shape layer selected when you're drawing, you're going to add into it. That's why we've got an ellipse inside with the other one. Okay, so no questions. Great. Fantastic. Thank you for keeping up. Okay, I'm going to go and say, let's pretend this is 1 second we're talking about here, okay? I could get there by going 1:00, and I'm at 24 frames, okay? So I'm just going to copy these keyframes. The position doesn't matter right now because really I'm just focusing on the rotation, but I'm just doing it anyway out of habit. Okay, and then the halfway point is 12, so it's 0 frames, 12 frames, 24 frames per second, 12 plus 12 is 24, so this is the halfway point. I'm just going to do rotation here just because, get rid of the positions, so no one's confused watching too many keyframes. Now we've got some space back. Okay. The reason nothing's moving is because I set my keyframes and set up my character, and then I added keyframes without changing them. Okay? Nothing has changed over time. This is the same at the beginning, middle, and end. To get a walk cycle, let me lower my render. Move my panels back. So it needs to start and end the same for a successful loop, okay? So what I'm going to do is change only the middle. So if it's in the front, it goes to the back. So I simply make this number negative if it's positive. Make sure I'm on the right keyframe when I do it. So that's a negative, so I'm going to make it positive. There goes the arm back. This one's positive, so I'm going to make it negative. Now it's in the front. Same thing. So we're going this, that, that. Let's hit the space bar to preview it. That's a rough walk cycle. I just want everyone to realize if the front arm is forward, the front leg is in the back. So whatever arm is forward, the opposite leg is in the front. The arms and the legs alternate. So it's going from this pose to that pose. Okay? Now, at the point right here, let me try something out real fast. This is just messing around. We'll see what that looks like. One sec. Okay, that's a bit touch much, so let's try going a little more subtle, and I'll explain it in a second. Okay, that's a little bit better. At the halfway point of your walk cycle is the down, okay, with a little bit of squash, because you're stepping down to the ground, then you spring back up. So what I did was, let me hit pause. For my torso, I told you I'm setting the anchor point right there at the bottom. So if that anchor point's at the bottom, I can keep everything aligned. So if I'm non-uniformly scaling it down a little bit, it's going to look like the character's dipping down. So I'm just going from 100, 100 on the up to 198, shrinking a little on the down, and then back up to 100, 100. And that little bit of jostle See, now it's got a little bit of bounce and motion to it. Okay. And then ultimately what you would do is, if the character's walking, you could either do this loop and have the room slide in behind them, which is the easy way of doing it. And then you could gradually just end up how you want to be. So let's pretend right here's where they're going to stop. So if they're going forward, 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 and then what we're going to do is we're going to have the front arm rest at the side a little bit, and the torso is going to stay where it is. The back arm is going to need to swing forward a little bit, and then the legs are going to gradually come to about there. So let's see if that looks like the person came to a stop. And I'll drag this out a little bit so we've got a beat to see it resting on for a moment. Okay, that's a bit sudden, but that's the point of what you're going to do is pretend I'm swinging back 36 and I want to stop walking here. What I could do is the next motion, instead of going back 36, go back like maybe 18, and then the next time back 9, then 0. So you're gradually swinging less and less with your arms. You're mathematically reducing it. So if I know I'm going 36, like I said, doing half of that the next time, all the way down, and that will make you ease into that resting position. Does everyone understand shrinking that down little by little, or do you need to see that? This was a fast character rig. Obviously, you would have forearms and hands, okay? So I want to show you something while we're talking about characters in motion. We talked a little bit about follow through and overlapping action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to... Okay, great. Glad you're all following along. I like having engaged people who want to learn. It makes teaching that much more rewarding. And I'm going to keep these all different colors. Obviously you would have better artwork, but you know. I'm moving my anchor point to the top already. Such. Now when I duplicate it, the anchor point's already where I want it to be. So that if I rotate the lower arm, you can see what's going on. Now the hand, we'll put the anchor point where it meets the arm. No, I'm not really. I'm just freehanding this because I've got a pop filter in front of my microphone and it's blocking my hand from reaching the keyboard easily. So I'm just trying to go for speed rather than the proper way of doing this. Okay, so with this layer stack, remember it's what the viewer is seeing. I want my lower arm to be above the upper arm so that when it bends, you can see it. So I'm going to parent my lower arm to the upper arm. And I'm going to parent the hand to the lower arm. So that means if I rotate my lower arm, the hand moves with it. Okay? And if I rotate the upper arm, the whole arm's going to move together. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to start back here. And you can see my anchor points aren't lining up perfectly with the upper arm and the lower arm, but this is to teach you something. So if I'm going forward, and then here I'm going up, and then down. Okay, so follow through and overlapping action. This is what's driving the motion, the shoulder. What's furthest away stops moving last. So it's going to be, as this is moving, I can actually have my lower, one second, not the position, I want the rotation. And I'll explain that in a second. I'm going to start with this arm back a little bit. So as this swings through, carry forward a little bit. Here's the top of the motion for that. I'm going to have it carry past it. And then as it comes down, I'm going to have it go past it again. So once the upper arm stops moving, up, what a yo-yo. Look what I did, 1 second. I didn't keyframe it and no one called me out on it. Okay, so it's starting here. We'll click my stopwatches. Then as it goes up here, I'm gonna have it rotate past. As it goes down, have it rotate a little bit past it again. And you notice my keyframes are not lining up because this is dragging from the upper arm. So it moves past it like that. Now we're getting a little bit more realism. The hand is further from the upper arm. So I'm going to move the hand back a little bit. And as this one swings up, I'm going to go a little bit past it. I'm going to rotate up a little bit more. And as this swings down, it's going to go past it a little bit and go past. And I'm going to ease all these keyframes to get a more natural motion. I just right click over them like such. And let's see what that follow through and overlapping action looks like with an arm. See? Each part's moving a little bit independently and a little bit more than the other pieces to give you that extra bit of motion and jostling and settling. So looking at that, just picture that was the full arm moving, and I'd have additional keyframes for the other parts of that arm. But the rule's always the same. When this arm's back, the other arm's forward. If this is swinging back, the other arm's swinging forward. Same with the legs. If you're going to have an upper leg, a lower leg, and then a foot, exact same thing. The knees are going to move a little different, and there's going to be extra bending. But that's the concept. Your right arm's forward, your left leg is forward. It's always the opposite. Forward, back, forward. So no matter how many pieces you link along to it, just think about your follow through and overlapping actions and that squash and stretch as you're walking. Not only, like I said, once this is all rigged, I'm going to hit U to hide my keyframes. Once this is all rigged, like, not only do you have the character rigged for walking, but then, you could then say, okay, well, now he's going to paint on the canvas. So he's standing still, and now you can focus on, say, right about here, after he's done walking. Let it all rest for a second. And I'm adding keyframes here so that there's a rest beat. And I move forward and I say, okay, well, I'll start raising the lower arm. And then a little bit after that, the hand can come up to start painting. Okay? And I know the hand doesn't look that closed for the fist, but we'll pretend that this is a paintbrush and it's to scale because I'm all about realism and I like being precise and wonderful with my artwork. Oh, very good. I like that. If you can do a good dad joke along with learning, then we're going to all get along fine. So check this out. I already did all this animation, but I just added in this paintbrush right here. All I have to do is figure out what I want. I want to parent this paintbrush to the hand. Now watch what's going to happen. Paintbrush is moving along with the hand, and as the hand comes up at the end, the paintbrush comes up with it. Parenting will save you lots of time, keep your character together, and give you that unified professional motion. Just watch you ease your keyframes, and if you even want to get more into it, work on your speed graph with your keyframes. And just a quick recap on the speed graph, these yellow squares are your keyframes, and it's also the amount or value of what's changing, how much is rotating. So if I drag this up or down, it'll rotate less or more. The yellow handle is what you drag, and moving out of it, I'm slowing into that keyframe. Moving in towards this one, I'm speeding into it. Opposite direction, I'm slowing out of it. In this way, I'm speeding into it. So you can think about your velocity in and out of your keyframes. Moving away from the keyframe slows out of it. Moving towards the keyframe speeds more into it. So that will give you that refined professional motion that people will notice when they review your motion reels. Okay, so like I said, just think about all your pieces. Watch where your anchor points are. You want all your anchor points to be where they join up with the body. Like the shoulder, it's going to be there. Also, where your joins are, since it's a human, you're going to want to have rounded joins, okay? Like this circle. If you want the arm to taper down, let's pretend the circle is 100 wide and you made this 80 wide by the elbow, and you connect with your paths, you're going to have a tapered down arm, okay? Let me solo this upper arm so you can see. Round join where it begins, round join where it ends, anchor point at the center of that round join. Now I'm going to solo the lower arm. Round join where it begins, round join where it ends, elbow, wrist, and then the path connecting it. Most importantly, this circle that I had on my upper arm, I duplicated for the lower arm, so it's the exact same size, the exact same position. And again, for right here at the end of the lower arm, I duplicated that circle, exact same size, exact same position for the hand, okay? And then I just unified my shapes in After Effects. And I'll show you what that means. I didn't want to have this sloppy mess here. And most importantly, for this is something that's a little bit of subtlety that will really stick out if you go this far with it. And I'll show you what I mean. As that arm bends, see there's a crease to it. And I could send you a quick link on this after the lecture, just to save everybody some time. But with the artwork, here's my upper arm over here. I'm going to solo this so you can see it. Twirl down the contents. Ellipse, that's the elbow. Ellipse, that's the shoulder and the path. If I select all three, holding down Shift, right click and group, now it's one shape. Okay, and I'll call that sleeve. If I get rid of the stroke on that, it's now one big shape. And if I duplicate it, I'm going to hide that. I'm going to turn off the fill on the stroke and turn this on again. Okay. When you're working with shapes in After Effects, you might know the Pathfinder in Illustrator. Well, there's a way of doing something like that in After Effects. I want all this, rather than having these strokes here, I want to go around like you'd see in a cartoon. All I have to do is select my stroke layer, go to Add, Merge Paths, and I just make sure that Merge Paths is set to Add, and it takes all those strokes. See, that's what it looked like before. Set it to Add. Now it's one nice stroke around the whole shape to get you that nice cartoon look that you see on TV. So I can turn back on the sleeve, I now have the sleeve with the stroke going around it as one shape layer to take care of. So you can get more complex looking illustrations and still have less artwork to take care of. I'm going to actually, I've got a second here, so I'll show you how I got that arm to bend like that. I do the same thing here. Group the shapes, called sleeve. Naming your layers takes a little extra time, but it saves you in the long run. I'm going to duplicate that layer by hitting Command D. And make sure you got the group selected when you're doing that. And I'm going to call it stroke by hitting Enter. Okay, so on my sleeve, I'm going to turn off the stroke. So it's just a fill. And on the stroke, I'm going to turn off my fill. And there we are with our stroke. And again, we're getting this hodgepodge mess. We got to go Add, Merge Paths, and it's already set to add from before, but make sure it's set to add. So we've got too much of a crease where the arm is. That's no problem because, and I told you before at the beginning of the class, we separated our fill and our stroke. The stroke is separate. So I'm going to add to that stroke layer a trim path. And I told you before, you can animate anything with the stopwatch. We don't need to animate this stroke trim path. So that's the end. Let's see the start. That's a bit much. So I'm going to use my offset now to change where we see that. That's looking pretty good right there. So I just ate away at the start and then adjusted my offset. So we don't have that closed off stroke around it anymore. It's just around part of it. And what that means is when the arm's down, you don't really notice it, but as it moves up, you get that really nice, clean crease that you see in most TV animations these days. So let me adjust that trim path a little bit more because I got a second. Lower arm, contents, stroke. There's my trim path. Pull that back. And then I'll adjust the offset a little bit more. Have it go a little bit further. You can keep playing around with it until it hits the way that you want it to. Doesn't need to be severe, but that right alone is what employers are going to look for if you're rigging characters, saying, oh look, they've got that, they know about offsetting the paths and trim paths and merging shapes to get that more complex look. So that's just a little food for thought while you're working on your character. Now, I'm going to close that. And there's just my full rigged character of what we were talking about earlier. I'm going to close this one and that. I can close that. Okay, I'm going to tackle this one next. 1 second while I sip my tea. Okay, like the contrast, like the color. And I know I don't have your font, but you know, let's take a look at this. And I love everyone staying on top and managing their time. It means a lot to me. You're going to get better work, and that's going to help you in the long run. Because the name of the game is getting a career after college and taking your time and doing it right. Then you can focus more on the job search once you're done rather than redoing everything. One thing I want to show you is, add a little stroke to this. And we'll lighten that up a little bit just to make it stand out. Even though it should be a little darker because it's going inward, but I'll go lighter for this. Okay. I see. Is it focusing lens? Good. Alright, now let's try something. I'm just experimenting here real quick. Yep, that's how you do it. Okay. So what I've done is I put a stroke on shape. Let's see if I make this a little thicker, if that helps it stand out. So you had a fill, I put a stroke on it. I then, with that shape layer selected and my selection arrow, went to add offset paths. Offset paths will duplicate something mathematically exactly in either direction, inward or outward. Okay, so I made 6 copies. I offset the amount by what I felt looked right. And then I changed the offset to a negative, so it's going inward. Otherwise, it'd be going outward. And anything with the stopwatch can be animated over time, but I think that little bit of subtlety will help it read like a camera lens. Not sure about the gearish shape here. But okay, so the lens is focusing. I like what you got going on there. I think what might help sell this is fingers around turning it, moving with the thing. And you could do that like we did earlier with parenting. So is this the shape that's moving? Yep, okay. So let's pretend that that's a finger. I'm going to parent it to the pre-comp. See, it's moving with it. Okay. Just again, real fast. If I click and drag, no fill. And the stroke is going to be the width of the finger. I'm just going to make it red. We'll pretend that's the skin color. And then quickly you go down to your stroke and give it a round cap and a round join so it's more finger looking. And I'm going to call this finger fill. Well, no, I'll just call it finger. And then I'm going to duplicate it. Let's see where we at. That's the shape is what I wanted. That's what we'll call that the fill. If I duplicate that, I call this a stroke, even though technically it's a stroke, but I'm going to put that below it. And I'm going to change the color to white just so it stands out on the screen. And make it a little bit wider. So now we've got that fill and the stroke. You don't need the outline around it if you don't want it. But if you do have it, it's going to help it pop off the screen a little bit more. For each finger you have, just make sure that the one that's the outline around it, you drag the path pick whip to the fill pick whip. Goes that way. When you move your path and animate it, the outline around it will animate with it. And lastly, you don't want that where it meets the hand. And to fix that, you just add a trim path and you adjust the start or end. It's going to be the start. So when it meets up with the hand, you know, the flesh color melts into it and the stroke continues around the hand the way it would. But I think having some fingers around this, you know, look at how people hold lenses. You can even watch yourself in the mirror doing that. Use it for reference, how you grip it, and then just parent those to this. That'll look really nice. Now, I'm just going to do some quick shapes. That's that, and everything's going to be a different shape just so it sticks out, and a different color as well. Okay, so we've got 3 shapes, alright? And I'm going to zoom in for this part. Here's my magnifying glass. Here we go. I'm going to keep saying this each week. These are my modes. Here's the toggle switches and modes. Here's my switches, the little check boxes. That's the switches. That's the modes. And you can get back and forth between them by clicking toggle switches and modes. What I just did, these are 2D shapes. They're flat, okay? If for each layer I want to make 3D enabled, I just click the little grid with the 3D cube. Each one of those shapes is now three-dimensional. Well, they're taking up 3D space. And what that means is I'll add a fourth shape so you can see the difference. It'll be, I'm gonna make it, let's see, what color don't I have? Purple. Okay, it's gonna be purple. I hit R for rotate. The one that is not 3D enabled, I can only rotate it like a propeller or swing it from side to side like a pendulum. That's with the center point right there. I'll move it up to the the corner. So it can swing like a pendulum or spin around like a propeller. But every one I 3D enabled, I can rotate on the X, Y, or Z. And what that means is you can swing back and forth. You can spin it on an axis, like you see in a lot of movie opening credits. The letters spin on the Y axis, and Z is just the traditional one that you're used to. So that's what 3D enabling does just for rotating. But in terms of position, the purple again, that is only 2D. You've got two axes, X, the side to side, Y, up and down. But once you 3D enable, you get the third one, X, Y, Z, closer or further from the camera. Does everyone understand what I just showed you? That by clicking that box, we're adding a third axis now. I'm going to visually show you in a second. Think of this as the sky, the mountains, the road. They're all their own layer, okay? Parallax. First off, you have to be 3D enabled for your layers, like we are. The more distance they have spread apart in Z, I'm going to do 5,000. This one, I'm going to keep it 0, and this one I'm going to do negative 5,000. Okay, and it went off the screen. Layer, new. Camera. I'm just going to say, hey, whatever, I don't care, because that's, if you import a 3D rendered object. Okay, that's a good question. After Effects can't really take 3D objects unless you're messing around with Cinema 4D Lite, which is a plugin, and I've got some tutorials on that. I think that's like week 8 or 10. But you're not gonna have rounded things like spheres and all that unless you're in the Cinema 4D workspace. So I'm gonna focus right now on showing you this real quick. So here's my camera tool up here. I'm gonna put it here so you can see it. The first one is your unified camera. And you hit the C key to get the camera. And when you hit C again, it's gonna change the camera. So that's unified, that's orbit, that's side to side or up and down, and this is zoom in or zoom out. I'm showing you zoom in and zoom out first because I gotta find that other shape and where it went. There we go. So I had to zoom out a lot, and you can see how far apart these are. So now I'm gonna hit C. I'm back in my unified camera. I can swing around however I want, like you're seeing right now. Fun, Command Z to undo. I'm gonna hit C again. This is my orbit camera. If I hold down Shift when I click and drag, I can stick to just the X-axis or the Y-axis. Okay, I'm gonna hit undo. Orbit camera is real useful for spinning around logos and things like that. Thank you very much, Carrie. Now I'm gonna hit C one more time. This is my side to side. That's called a panning shot, and up and down is tilt. So if I hold down Shift, I'm just moving the camera side to side. And if I hold down Shift when going up and down, that's a tilt. Okay, and then I'm gonna hit C again, and that's just my zoom in, zoom out. I'm just clicking and dragging to get there. Now, we got that by adding in a camera and 3D enabling the layers we wanted. So the further apart they are, the greater the parallax you're going to get. Okay, your sky is going to be far beyond the mountains, then the foreground, the midground, then the foreground, things like that. Okay, thank you very much, Alex. So here's parallax. Everyone watching, look at the shapes. I'm just moving the camera, but as the camera moves, the relation of the shapes distorts, and it looks like their spatial relations change. The rule of thumb with parallax, whatever is closest to the camera looks like it's moving faster, and whatever is further from the camera looks like it's moving slower. I'm moving the camera the same distance, but the red square in the front looks like it's moving further and faster than the yellow star in the back. That's parallax. Things spread out in 3D space on the Z, and the camera moving, and how the relation between those images changes based upon what the camera is doing because they're spread out on the Z-axis. So let's jump back to your drawing. If that sky's really far back and then the clouds are a little closer, this hill a little closer, that mountain a little closer, the bends in the road, like that could be one section, that could be another section, that could be another section. The more layers you have and the more spread out you have, the better your parallax will look. And watch this. If I go to my zoom in, zoom out. So if you're zooming, I think you'd have a better success with zooming out of your scene. But you see, you're going to get a lot of interest and depth in your scene as you're zooming out with the camera. And the beauty with parallax is, even if nothing's moving, you've still got some life and depth because they're spread out in Z space and the camera's moving back and forth. But that doesn't mean you can be, doesn't mean you can't move things around if you want. I can have that motion happening while the camera zooms in. What I do is, if I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing, like let's say I know for a fact I'm going to be zooming and just that, I can focus on just using the stopwatch for the zoom. If you don't know, then I would suggest clicking all of them. Point of interest, position, orientation, rotation, just so that you can explore and animate in and out. But I'm just animating my zoom here on the camera, and that green pentagon is moving at the same time. Another little fun tip with camera motion, use the fewest number of keyframes possible. You'll get smoother motion, and I would always suggest easing in and out of your camera motion. So that's what parallax does. So, like I said, break that apart into so many layers, it's scary. Have them be much larger than you need in the width and the height, because when you move them back into the horizon, they're going to get smaller and smaller the further they get from the camera. So, like I said, if this whole terrain right here, you've got that artwork continue down, and then the next one over top of it and top of it, you're going to get some nice depth. So it's going to look pretty interesting. And you obviously know the anvil falling would be the position. And let me show you here. Don't forget when you've got, I'm going to do no fill and a stroke. I'm just going to make it white just because the background's black. But you could animate the cracks out several different ways. Like, let's pretend this crack is the way you want it, and you're like, wow, that's perfect. Well, one thing you do is trim paths and animate the end, so if the anchor hits, the anvil hits here, it's animating outwards towards it. That's one thing you can do. Reading the comment now. Yep, no problem at all. To 3D enable, all you have to do is click on your switch with the cube for whatever layer you want to 3D enable. So here's my modes. You have to be in switches. And then for that layer, click the cube for each one. Just line up, that's off, that's on. See how it's boom, boom, just like that. 3D enable the layer and then spread them out in Z space. X side to side, Y up and down, Z closer or further from the camera. To add the camera, to add anything, if you don't know where it is, just go Layer, New. That's where you can add your text, your solids, lights, cameras. We just got the camera here. I stuck with a 35mm, but there's lots of different presets if you want. And then there it was in the scene, so. Actually, I'm gonna undo that. Fun fact. Okay, so. This is camera 1 that we're seeing. Okay, right there. And then there's camera 2, what we started off with. Whatever camera is on top, you can have more than one camera in the scene, okay? And I'm going to show you that in a second. Whatever camera's on top is the one that the viewer will see and that will render. Like, let's say I go to here, and then I turn on my second camera. And I'm like, well, what do I want to do here? Well, let's try doing the unified camera, and then I'll zoom out a little bit. Right there. Then I'll pan it up a little bit so it ends up there. So if I want this to start here, I could see how I get the double arrows. I could click and drag and hold down Shift, or I could hold down the Alt or Option key and hit the bracket next to the letter P. The bracket next to the letter P changes the in point where that layer starts. The bracket next to that one changes the out point where that layer ends. So you saw how it trimmed that side. So we've got this camera, then that camera pops up, and then that camera. That's just a quick preview of Parallax. It's a very handy, neat way of getting some interesting designs. It's just good to have as many different tips, techniques, and tools in your belt so that you can come up with lots of different ways of animating. Now I'm going to address Liam's question. I'm going to make a new composition. Okay, so Liam was telling me he's got cracks that are shapes that he wants to animate. I'll turn off the stroke. Okay, so here's a layered Illustrator file. You just right click on whatever layer you need, create shapes from vector. Then you have a shape layer in After Effects. So I'm going to hop back here. We're going to pretend that's what we just did. So again, just choose a layer, right click, create shapes from vector, and now it's a shape layer in After Effects. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my anchor point for this at the end where I want it to grow out of. First thing I'm going to test is non-uniform scale. I'm going to have this be just a couple frames of animation. Already you see what's happening there. Since it's at an angle, that's not working. So I'm going to rule that option out. Next, I'm going to do a linear wipe effect. And linear wipes, see what's going on there? It'll go from one edge to the next, and you could also pick the angle it's going at, and you could feather it if you want. Do not feather your crack that you're drawing. So let's have it go from that way. So if I have it start, the start will either be 100 or 0 based upon your artwork. So if I go forward a little bit, Let's see what that looks like. That's a bit fast. Let's see it again. If it's going too fast, just drag your keyframes further apart. So that's one way of doing it. With a linear wipe, controlling the angle, animating the transition completion. I'm going to turn off that effect by hitting the FX. You could also do it up here. Let's also try doing an alpha matte. The red shape you're seeing on top is my alpha matte, and the purple lightning is behind it. And what this alpha matte's going to do is anything inside this red matte will be visible to the viewer. Anything out of it will be invisible. I'm going to animate the position of the crack so it looks like it's growing from underneath the alpha matte. I move my playhead to where I want to start, click my position, and click again. Okay, so this is where I want it to end up. I'm going to work backwards. I'm going to kind of have it come in on an angle matching the shape of the crack. Like that. Then the last step is, I said before, I'm in my switches, I want to be in my modes. Click down there. And I told you the expression that I use. You put a mask over your face. This square we're using to mask the layer below it. So the mask goes over your face. Here's what we're using to mask. Here's what's below. We click on the thing below. And under track matte, choose alpha matte. And you see the crack shape coming out from underneath the alpha matte. That's another way of revealing it. And this way, it seems to have a bit more life and motion than with the, the linear wipe. So same type of concept. I'm duplicating this one, putting it on top. And I'm going to get rid of the keyframes. And I'm going to turn on the linear wipe. This way we can look at the two animations back to back. That's linear wipe. And this one is an animated position with an alpha matte hiding its entrance. They both have different life to them, but it's just showing you two different ways of drawing it on. The linear wipe actually looks a little bit more realistic to the motion, in my opinion. I'm glad you gave me that question because one, it refreshed your minds on how to change an Illustrator layer into a shape layer, and also you saw how sometimes if you try to non-uniformly scale something and it's at an angle, then you can run into some problems. There is one third option. I'm duplicating that one more time and I'm going to turn off the linear wipe. See, I like this because it shows you how there's so many different ways of doing something, and each way you do it changes the motion slightly. So it's really about getting the look you want. You can always animate the path of the shape. I'm going to try something here. I'm not selecting the last two path points where it's growing from. And I'm just trying to have all my paths stay aligned to each other and then end up where they're growing out of. We're going to see what this looks like when I animate it over time. If you ever get clicked off, just click back on your keyframe to get back to your path. But you see how I'm trying to stay true to the shape by not forcing everything to line up perfectly. Also doing it this way, I'm trying to ensure that my path points stay a similar distance away from each other, like keeping the volume of the shape. And don't worry, this is where the anvil will be covering it up. That's a third way of doing it. And you could always exaggerate this if you want. This way gives you a lot of options as an animator. Like let's say at this point I want the tip to be in faster. Well, let me see. So if I went there, what I'm going to try here is I'm going to drag this part out like that a little bit just to alter the shape, but have these come in sooner and have this one come out a little later. See how I got some after motion by adding that extra keyframe, then having it carry through? That's just a thought. So that's another way of doing it. So far I think I like linear wipe the best, but that's just showing you 3 different ways of doing animating in your shape layer crack. Don't worry about it. I'm just messing around. That's the shatter effect. I just threw it over top of the text. You can change the shape that's being shattered. And I just changed it from wireframe and forces to rendered. That's what the wireframe and forces looks like. You can preview the shape. You can even do custom shapes. You can make the extrusion deeper if you want. The more repetitions and complexity you add to it, the more it's going to add to your render time. You can adjust the forces, the gradient, the physics, the textures used. Anything with the stopwatch can be animated over time, and some things are just driven through physics engines like forces. You could have some fun with this background. It's a shape layer, which is good. And did you make it with path points or a rectangle? Okay, so it's a rectangle it looks. I threw a cylinder effect on it just for the fun of it. Give it a little bit of depth and curve as it's coming down. And I just watched that. The final spot to line up more accurately with that bottom of the shape. This just adds a little bit of interest as it's coming in and fills up that 3D space that you're faking with the bouncing ball shrinking as it recedes into Z space. See what I mean? It resolves a little bit better at the end because at the very least have the final rest of the ball hit the ground plane in time like that. And this was just a quick mess around. You could go in and change the lighting and shading on it if you wanted, but that little bit of gray actually helps add some depth to the shot. You see how you can get more dramatic looks just with little bits of shading here and there. Adds some depth to it. You could also change the color of the light too. Just showing that. Some food for thought. But it's coming along nicely. And also with this, you've got some play and possibilities for your text as it's coming in as well. And once this is done rendering, I'm going to hop over to the last logo that was on my menu for tonight. This little bit of the curve plays off of the round shape of the lens as well, as opposed to that just flat box coming in. Just something to consider. Okie doke. So, last one. The echoing of shapes. Now, I would love to see what the storyboard is going to be for this, and I don't think you need the productions. That's just my 2 cents. But there might be a neat way of animating that in. And then I'm going to bring it into Illustrator. Not Illustrator, we're already in Illustrator. You know what I meant. So if I go File, Import File, here it is right here. Let's try Retain Layer Sizes, see what we get. Should be 3 layers. Yep. Boom, there they are. Alright, fun. I'm going to hide productions for now. Now, I want to show you something, because I had a thought looking at this. I hid the other layers just so I can focus on this. I'm going to throw a light rays effect on here, and this is a perfect time to show you this little troubleshooting. What you're going to see happening is this, and I'm going to explain it in a second. Okay. The checkerboard, that's your alpha, and clicking this will show or hide the alpha, alright? The alpha is the negative space. There's nothing here, it's transparent. That's what those checkers are. That's what's see-through, transparent, nothing there, that's negative space. I just click this to show or hide it. It's always there. It's just easier on your eyes to work with that turned off. The little C shape, that's the positive space. Okay, so does everyone understand that this C shape is the positive space, the black all around it is the negative space, and it's really transparent. It's see-through, but I just have that transparency turned off. You get that positive-negative space relation? Now, see this box around the layer. That's called a bounding box. Even though this C is round, or if I put a letter A and it's a triangle, you're always over every layer you put in After Effects going to have a bounding box around it. It's always going to be either a square or a rectangle. Even if your shape is round or triangular, the computer plots everything by these 4 corners. So it's always going to be a square or a rectangle, even if your shape is not. That's why when I put this effect on, we see it is hitting that imaginary bounding box the viewer doesn't see, but we see it because this is that bounding box. I'm going to remove that effect by hitting Command X to copy it and cut it, so I cut it off. Now, I'm going to just simply right-click that layer, pre-compose it, and move all attributes into a new composition. What that did Look at that bounding box. The bounding box is now the size of my composition. So if I paste that effect onto that pre-comp, now it's behaving properly. Okay? So I wanted to show you that so you could, one, understand troubleshooting. The first troubleshooting I always do is I see if pre-composing fixes things. Now you have an understanding of what a bounding box is, why it does what it does. Because this light effect might actually look pretty neat moving through this shape. And as it hits edges, it behaves differently than when it doesn't. But if that were what you were going to do something like this, remember the crosshairs, always where you want to start or stop. So you can figure out where you want this to come in. Maybe you want it to come in there. And you would just animate your center and just keep moving it however you want to move it and follow whatever shape you want. I'm doing a lot of small movements because this is a curve. It's going to be a little bit tougher of a path for it to follow. Let me hit undo because I did not grab the center point right there. But you get the point. You just keep moving and moving and moving. And then we can change the look and feel of the effect in a second. But all these negative space steps, this is like one of the first things that popped into my head when I saw it. And then once it leaves the shape, it's gone. Like such. So the radius. See, by adjusting that, we're getting a completely different light effect. Got it? Shrinking it down, we get more of a halo. Whereas growing it a little bit, we get those bends. It's all about going big and then dialing it down to find the look you want. Going extreme helps you see it faster. And then you just watch how your effect changes over time. Another thing I want to bring up when you're working with light effects, 8 BPC, that's bits per channel. To change your bits per channel, you just go to your project panel, hold down Alt or Option and click. First click takes you to 16-bit. Second click takes you to 32-bit. 32-bit is a higher dynamic range and really makes your light effects sing. So that's what light rays looks like. Light sweep, we've talked about before. I could wait for that to come in and then have the light sweep animate. I just choose the direction right here. And you can see it already coming in on the text, so just make sure it comes in off of it. Move forward in time. And then just make sure it fully goes past the text. And I would want that cyberspace to come in before the sweep. The sweep starts here. So what I can do is break out my old pal linear wipe, because I'm just showing you another use for it. This is the direction of the effect. We want it to go in the opposite direction. So if that was going the opposite, I just change it from positive 90 to negative 90. Now it's going the way I want, and this is a good use of the feather, so that the type has a little bit of subtlety and softness as it comes in. So this is where I want this to be fully on, so I click my 0 transition there, and let's say it fades on over 1 second. So here is where it's fully off. So I'm going from 100% to 0%. Now let's preview that again. I'm going to deselect everything by hitting Command-Shift-A. So again, these were just some thoughts I had looking at it. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let me show you another one. There's our shape of the logo. Another useful thing is a radial wipe. And I just got to make sure I have this near the center of the circle. So you can see I'm off. Wipe center. Let's try here. Now that I have it on, I can say, let's try about here. And we could also change the direction of it. But it's also finding that starting angle. There we go. Adjusting my starting angle. Now how's this working the way that I want it to? Let me move it a little bit past because it was covering up that a little bit. So I was off by 10 degrees. So we'll go from 100 to 0. And let's feather it a little bit. Let's go to the midpoint and see what that looks like. Yeah, the feather adds a little bit of depth to that, and it's also affecting the light rays. So let's put the radial above the light rays, and look, now the light rays are going all the way across the screen. The way you stack your effects in the effects panel is just as effective as the way you stack your layers in the layer timeline. This will be seen before that. Glad I did this so I could show you that little thing and how it affects the animation. It's all about finding a stopwatch, moving the playhead, clicking that stopwatch where you want that motion to begin, and then moving the playhead to where you want that motion to end and making a change over time and space. Motion design is graphic design, just adding time and space. You can work forwards in your timeline, or you can work backwards, lay everything out where you want it, figure out when you want it to be at its resting position, and then work backwards from there till you get the look you want. So I really appreciate all of you for being so diligent in coming to the optional virtual labs. I hope you're finding them useful and insightful. My other students have found that way because you get to see some things you won't see until weeks down the road. But at least this shows you other tips, techniques, tricks, and troubleshooting. I mean, that's what it's all about. Motion design is 85% mental. Yeah, try and troubleshoot your ideas, and then the rest of it is just managing your time and executing your thoughts. I like seeing how so many people are working week after week after week and progressing and just fine-tuning their ideas. Makes me happy to see that you're juggling all your other classes and getting ready for your graduation shows and also taking this class seriously, because you can do some very powerful, well thought out ideas with the right time management, and you want the best portfolio pieces once you graduate. And there's other things you could do to push this, like adding some fog for some depth, but we'll cover all that stuff later on down the road. Just give me a little bit of a preview of things up in advance. Thank you all very much for all your time and attention. I mean, that's invaluable as an instructor. Makes my job that much easier and more rewarding. Have a great night. Everyone stay safe in the snow out there, and take it easy when you're driving. Give yourself plenty of time. Make sure you stay at least a car length minimum away from the car in front of you in case they get stuck in the snow. You'll have space to get around them. Yeah, have a great night. Thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great weekend.